Stephen Lake, how long have you been Dean of Gloucester now?
Well, it was 9 years in June, so 9 years on. I was in lockdown.
Wow! And is this the hardest period that you've ever been through? Would you say as a dean, or?
Yeah, I've been ordained 31 years now, so getting long in the tooth. But yeah, I can't, like everybody, I can't remember a time like this. And I think the thing for all of us is that it's not just the professional side of life, it's the personal one as well. And certainly for me, professionally, having a building that is meant to be open 365 days a year closed is a big thing. But then also my daughter got the virus. She works at the hospital, and my wife and my middle son were having to shield, and 12 weeks is a long time. Yeah. So I think, so many stories can be told about how the professional and the personal collide in this period. And that's why I think it's been so draining for everybody.
Well, without a shadow of a doubt. I mean, not only are you, like myself in a way, you're trying to run a business, you're trying to look after your colleagues, your husband and a brother and a father, and all these different hats we wear. And then trying to deal with them all. And, something I found out in business is that it's been really, really stressful for an awful lot of people. And people who run companies for a long time would suddenly see their livelihoods just washed away, with a stroke, really, for nothing, no fault of their own.
Absolutely no fault of their own.
No. And of course, friends becoming sick and family members and all the rest of it as well. So
I think it was also, Mark, the not knowing of where it was going to go.
Yes.
I remember at the beginning being probably for the first time in my life genuinely frightened. Now I know that's a first world problem, and many more challenging things, but the normal sequences of life, birth, death, all of those things in normal times are hard, but are real and expected. But I think it was the invisibility of this and the speed at which it came upon our communities. I think actually in Gloucester, we've done really well, and there's much to be proud of. But I'm aware that many people have made many sacrifices in this time.
Does it test your faith, something like this?
It would be wrong of me to say in any kind of glib way, no, of course it doesn't, because faith is also about doubt. You can't have one without the other. However, do I believe that God has sent this? No. Do I believe that this is something that's been seen before? Yes, we've just not been used to it. I mean, the last time the cathedral was closed was 1208. And that wasn't from a pandemic, and it stayed open during the Black Death. So, there's an element of looking up at the building as I do from my study table. It's seen it all before. So for me, there's something about the steadfastness of God in all of this. And in fact, nationally and internationally, people have returned to prayer. They've returned to reading scripture. Numbers at services, online services, have gone through the roof. Right. And that's, things that we've been learning. So none of that will change. But certainly, I think when people are confronted with their mortality, it does make them think a bit harder when they've been able to take that for granted.
No, that's very true. And you are right. I mean, it was extremely frightening time. And we're not over it yet. I think that's the biggest problem. I think there's I don't know, I just get this feeling that suddenly people have just not forgotten, but I know you want to push it to the back of your mind, but sometimes I think some people push it a little bit too far in the back of their minds. I don't know. In some ways you want life to come back to normal, but it's not going to be back to normal for a long time.
It's going to be a new normal. And I was in an hour Zoom call with the Dean of Leicester earlier this week. And of course, after their news, that's a very different environment. And he can't get to his cathedral now because he lives just outside. So, to have that taken away as well, there's a long way to go. And in terms of, can you imagine at the moment everybody being crammed into the cathedral, 2,000 people for, the great carol service, the 30,000 people that we go through in December, that's going to feel risky. And until we've come out of this, and until there's a vaccine, I think we're in a very different place, all of us.
Yes, it's funny. We have King's Home over there, obviously stadium of rugby, and there we have here Cathedral, the stadium of God, shall we say, or religion here in the city, just a stone throw away. And would you get the people crowding into both? But one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, and it was a feature we did a few years ago, really, which I called it the business of God. And I always found that, maybe I chuckled to myself, I quite like that. But one of the things that came out of that, and I'd just like you, perhaps we could touch on it again, is that you are really the chief executive of the cathedral. Can you just explain that, please? How many people work there? What's the turnover?
Sure.
How does it work on a normal day? And how do you manage everybody? Because there are so many different people. I would imagine you have a lot of volunteers. Anyway, I'll leave it to you. How do you do it?
Sure, I'll tell you. Well, it's in the how that you do it is what's been changed by this. So I said earlier about being open 365 days a year, and talking to those who might be in the business community about this. That's not necessarily the case for them. Never having a weekend, also being free to enter, not selling a product, not providing a service that you charge for. It's not a brilliant business model, if I'm honest, because
Really, no.
we don't even sell advertising. So it is a wing and a prayer, but that's a £3 million a year operation, and we contribute £8 million a year at least to the city simply by being here. In terms of the 400,000 visitors that would normally come. And so all of that means that we've got a lot to organise. So we've got about 70 staff, 55 full-time equivalents, so on. And at a time like this, they are relying on me and our team for their livelihoods, for their futures. I've just seen some figures that there's likely to be 400 redundancies across cathedrals in England this year. Cathedrals will have lost 28.4 million through all of this. We will have lost £1 million.
Right.
And if you are a charity and you're running a ship like that, then that's a big hit. But fortunately, we had completed a restructuring, not for any other reasons than wanting to reorganise ourselves, just before, as we were going into lockdown. So I'm really, my main mission in life, Mark, to be honest, at the moment, apart from getting services back, which we did for the first time on Sunday, is to really try and not make anybody redundant from Gloucester Cathedral. You can never say never, can you? But that's what I'm after, and that's why we're working so hard to make that so.
I mean, it's so. I've had to make people redundant, and I know lots of other business people do. None of us like to do it. It's actually heartbreaking.
Yeah, I've done it before. Yeah.
And well, I hope you don't. So the day-to-day running then. So how do you manage it normally? What would be the sort of process? Do you get all your team together? How does it work?
Yes, I mean, being as I say, 365 days. It means that we don't ever stop. There's a chapter steward, Emily Mackenzie, wonderful, who effectively is our chief operating officer. So Emily will look after the business side of things, and then obviously we've got our own senior management team. Everything that you would recognise in a business applies to the cathedral, but at the same time recognising that we are essentially about bringing people together, being available for all, not making any judgments about those who want to use us or abuse us or simply take us for granted. So everything that you would recognise about normal team meetings and Zoom meetings and everything else is our world too. We're just wanting to point to why and what it might all mean. So certainly through lockdown, regular meetings with all of this, and trying to get some sense of direction rather than normality, I would say, and keeping people in touch. You mentioned volunteers. Yeah, we've got over 400 volunteers, a fantastic group of people who give so much. But at the moment, we're not able to bring them in because obviously wanting to minimise journeys, wanting to minimise contact. Really, July and August, I think, as we've just reopened, need to be quite quiet and reflective. All our events have been cancelled. we thrive on providing events. We won't be looking at bringing those back until September onwards. So this is the final week of the King's School term. So all of those children that have been at school, speech day, end of term, leaving school celebrations, it's all gone. And that's a great shame. But what we're trying to do now, Mark, to be honest, is to get ourselves ready for what we need to do next, which is to be open, but be available to be doing memorial services for those who've missed out with rather perhaps inadequate farewells and funerals. Big thank yous for our NHS and so many other groups, bringing community together. When we'll be able to do that indoors, not certain, but we will be ready.
What's been the biggest strain to you personally throughout this? Is it that personal side or the cathedral, the business side?
It is in that balance, but I think the biggest strain have been the hours. And one of the things I say at the moment is I'd really quite like to switch my head off. You know how you can't leave the emails alone, and you can't, that what's next, that hyperactivity that is required by a response to this. And I think, to be honest, I was saying this in a meeting earlier with a national training thing for senior leaders. Actually, one of the things I've found very important in this is being able to have conversations like we're having now, where honesty reigns, and as well as being the leader that sorts things out, that you can show a bit of vulnerability. And in your teams, enabling that vulnerability to be named and honoured, and recognising where we all are, and only then can we all move on to do the day job. So I think that's been really important to me, that the humanity of in our response becomes less and less virtual.
Yes.
Just meeting with people is really, really valuable. We need to get back to that and find a way of doing it safely.
Do you think, I've been talking to lots of different people, and they're saying, are we going to go back to having the people working in the offices? Are we now all going to be working remotely? Where would that leave the high street? Where would it leave tourist attractions? Where would we leave the church? What's your view on that? Do you think over a period of time you get to a new norm? Do you think that's going to happen, where perhaps businesses will work from home? What do you think is going to happen next, shall we say?
Yeah. Well, I think we all need to remind ourselves that it's not that long ago that most of us didn't know what Zoom was.
Yes.
And now look at us all using this. So a change has come, and working from home, some people quite like. So there's going to be a mixed economy. Clearly, that has an impact on office space, although, and of course we've got our own offices and we rent out other offices with the buildings around the close. Having said that, meetings still need to take place in the future, and they'll need to be slightly more distant, and desks will need to be slightly more distant.
Yeah.
So all of that, I think, will find its own balance. What I think we do need to do and set as a priority is become less frenetic, and perhaps recognize that we can't go back to the way we were, because to some extent, and this, any summaries are poor, to some extent, certainly in the West, we've become quite used to having everything whenever we want. And that has now been exaggerated with deliveries to the door within 24 hours. And yet, actually, really what this time has shown us is that the pandemics of our time are the virus, our racism, and our climate change. And if we just go back to the way we were, none of those things will have been impacted upon by this experience. We can't go back to just ignoring those and consuming. So it will be hard. I think we do need to invest, particularly in the high street, but not in the way that it was. So you'll have heard that we're setting up a new city centre commission, which I'm going to chair. This is about, I think, repopulating places, obviously safely, but humans are social beings. So we just have to take our time, but we will have to find ways of coming together. Humanity is a team sport at its best.
Mm.
We can't really just spectate all the time, because it won't be any good for our well-being.
No, I do really agree with you that perhaps we, not perhaps, not even, we have overconsumed everything. One of the nice things about this, there has been nice things, is yes, you spend more time with your family. I've rediscovered gardening.
Yeah.
I actually grown some potatoes, which
Oh, you're better than me. Yeah.
I've never done anything like that before. And I've really, I mean, I spent a lot of time with my wife and children. I'm very lucky as well that they both the kids came back from where they were and all the rest of it. But one of the things is that you don't need all those things.
No.
You know, I open my wardrobe and it's 30 shirts there. I look in the bottom, I've got 15 pairs of shoes. I've got 40 pairs of pants. I've had a lot of time to count them, by the way. So, ways, too many drawers. And of course, if you're not going to work and you're not socializing, you're not doing, you don't need any of those things. I've literally worn around 10, forget the pants and socks, but you don't really need all that stuff. Maybe that's the problem, isn't it? We've all just been suckered into buying the pink kettle and then the green kettle and
and also I think we need to ask ourselves questions of sense of value. You know, you might have you spoke about growing your potatoes. Okay, that's got a greater sense of value to you than your underwear, on that basis. But actually what we're really talking about here is, what do we want to value going forward? A quick story. One of the young families in the cathedral service on Sunday, in order to keep themselves going, they've been celebrating different times of the year. And so last week they celebrated Christmas, and they got the tree out, they got the decorations out, they got the stockings out, they had a meal, they did presents that they'd all made themselves, and so on. And fantastic. Next week they're doing Valentine's Day, apparently, and keeping themselves going. But what it reminded me of was the Christmas Carol story from Charles Dickens and Ebenezer Scrooge. Money grabbing, and then on Christmas Eve, the ghost of Christmas past comes to him and shows him what his way of life has had in terms of impact on others. And then the ghost of Christmas present shows him what he's doing to people now. And then he realizes that unless he changes the future, nothing will change. And we'll be back to where we were at square one. I think this is all now about our future. As difficult as that has been to look forward to up till now, it's going to be complicated. But how do we want to live on this planet? It's the only one we've got. How do we want our relationships to be? How do we want to share our wealth with those in need? Or are we simply wanting to, be as we were and make judgments about others? If we don't ask ourselves those questions and come up with the answers together, then all we'll do is go back to taking everything for granted, and it will happen all over again.
I think that's a great place to stop, actually, Stephen. Thank you ever so much for your time. I always love chatting to you, by the way, and we've done it quite a few times over the years.
Absolutely.
And hopefully we'll be able to sit opposite each other, have a cup of coffee, and another chat soon, very soon, sir. So thank you ever so much for your time, and you do a wonderful job as well, by the way. I just want to say that for the city and all your team that work there. So please, keep going as well. Okay.
Thank you. Bless you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.